Okay, guys, so let's start with the fundamentals. So number one is that you can make up in skills where you lack in number. I can't say this enough. I honestly can't say this enough. When you're new, you can make up in skill where you lack in numbers, right? You're not that good. You're just working things out. You're starting to role play. You're starting to get the scripts. You're not that great. Everybody goes through it. So the way that you get better is, or get appointments or get business, is you just have to accept the fact that you're going to suck at first, and you just have to talk to more people. You have to do the activity more, and as by doing it more, you're going to get better. And then ultimately, you're going to be able to make up in numbers, other way around. So you can make up in skill where you lack in numbers versus you can make up in numbers where you lack in skill. Now, the second one is you've got to understand that the person who asks the question always controls the conversation. So I was cold called yesterday. Normally, I don't answer my office phone, but I thought that someone was actually paging me. And it ended up being a guy who didn't even know who I was. He was actually asking for somebody else. I know what he was doing. He got somebody's name, and he's trying to get a hold of the top person. He didn't know who I was. I answered the phone. He didn't ask my question. But anytime that happens to me, I always take full advantage of it. Now, look, I'm no different than the average consumer. If somebody calls me cold, my defenses are up. I'm busy. I got a lot of things going on. My initial reaction is going to be, thanks for calling. I'm really not that interested. But I decided to take some time and really just spar with this kid for a little bit. He was okay. He wasn't that great. But he always did have a rebuttal. Now, he didn't really have the fundamentals. I can clearly see that he doesn't practice. There are people who have natural ability on the phone. There's natural ability in everything. They don't have to practice that much, but it was clear this guy did not have a structure of a conversation because I have no idea what he was pitching me. All he did is just ask me if I wanted to meet with him to see what they can do to help us grow the brokerage. I have no idea who they were. They just called me cold. But I decided to play with him anyways. And I really took him off his game after, because every time he asked me a question, I answered it. I asked him a question. He went a second level deep, which I thought was great. He answered my question, asked me a question, but then I controlled the conversation from that point on because I responded to it, asked him a question, and then he just answered it. And then I asked another question, and he just answered it. And then I asked another question, he just answered it. And at the end of that, I just gave him some advice, and then I told him I still wasn't interested. The key is if you want to control the conversation, you have to accept the fact that you have to ask the questions. And the only way you're going to know about the questions that you're going to ask is if you write them down and you practice them. Longer than I wanted to go on that one. Number 3, you cannot change a person's perception or belief, only they can. And again, you can only do that through questions. Anything I say to you guys is not going to do anything. It's not going to change your perception. The only way that I'm going to be able to change your perception is by asking a question. So-and-so, do you think that by not practicing your scripts, you're going to automatically, miraculously become better? And then you're going to think about that. It doesn't make any sense. Well, no, I don't think that if I don't practice, I'm going to get better. Okay, I get it. We're in agreement on that. So do you think that when there's a $20,000 commission online and you're competing against other agents, do you think that you should just wing it? Or perhaps maybe you should practice it before you go sit down and go live? Well, God, now that you put it that way, maybe I should practice it, right? Now, I state this all the time in training, but until you guys actually internalize that and you actually ask yourself the question and then you answer it, of course, being honest, then that will change your belief system. Number 4, you don't have a lead until you know your why and when. I can't tell you how important this is. Why? Become that terrible 2. For those of us that have children, some of you have older children. I have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. I just came out of the terrible 2s. Actually, they should call it the terrible 4s because my 4-year-old asked why more than he did when he was 2. But when you think about the way that you communicate with people that you're comfortable with, and they say something, you're inquisitive. You ask why. Until you know the why, you can't really respond to it. And if you responded to somebody's objection without asking why and understanding the purpose of their objection, now you're being salesy. Now you're being that guy that nobody wants to be or that woman that nobody wants to be. Number 4 is, and we're going to talk, number 5, I should say, we're going to talk about this a little bit in today's training. When in doubt, mirror their objections as a question. I do this almost on the daily. Typically, it's not because I'm in doubt. Typically, it's because I need more information, right? If you repeat a objection or a question back at them as a question, like you're dumbfounded, then their natural response is going to be giving you a little bit more information, right? Now, you could go to the extreme. I actually learned this technique by reading the book, Never Split the Difference. And he talks about just doing this technique over and over and over and over again. Now, I haven't gone that, especially during prospecting. I'm not too interested in just having that type of a sparring match. I just want enough information to fill my to fill my prospecting gun or my sales gun so that I can solve their problem. Because that's all sales is, guys. Sales is solving problems. These people who want to sell their home, they got a problem. They need to sell it. They don't know how to do it. They need someone to do it. They pay you to do it, right? Someone wants to buy a house in this market, they got a big problem. Okay, so today's objection, we're going to roll into this. Again, guys, if you guys have any questions, hold down your space bar and turn this into a walkie-talkie. This is an objection that comes up pretty often. Why do other agents cut their commission and you don't? So I want to spend some time on that. There's like 10 different ways from Sunday that you can actually take on this, this objection. Here's one of the ways, and I'm just going to role play with myself and kind of walk through this. So why do other agents cut their commission and you don't? This is where I come back into repeat what they just said to you, form it as a question, and be dumbfounded, right? So okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, so your question is, why do other agents cut their commissions and I don't, right? Now, think about you on the other end of this. Think of you being the actual seller, and I said that to you, and I'm dumbfounded. Well, that's the natural cue, or your brain, your computer brain, is going to process it, and naturally, you're going to want to give more information. Unless you're that type of personality that's just going to say, yeah, and then just look at you. And then you guys can actually do a stare down if you want. Like, I don't understand. What do you mean? And then they'll give you more information. So repeat it. So why do other agents cut their commission and I don't? Well, yeah, you know, I've spoken to a few other agents and they're willing to cut their commissions to work with me, and I'm just curious, why won't you? Okay, so this is where we're going to get kind of more into the meat. Okay, number one, a lot of you have gone through some typical training, and they say repeat and approve. Okay, I don't always repeat and approve. I would add in repeat, approve, and or acknowledge. Okay, you just want to acknowledge that they had said something. Okay, well, that's an interesting question. I can see why it's important to you that other agents might be willing to cut their commission, and your question is why I won't. Now, before I answer that question, if you don't mind me asking, remember guys, this is a technique called a softener. By me saying that if you don't mind me asking, whether they do or don't, it softens the blow. It makes it so I'm not so, for lack of a better term, confrontational, not so direct, not so much in their face. If you eliminate the softener, depending on your personality, your whole conversation could go sideways. If you have a strong personality, if you have a driver personality and you're very straight and direct, if you throw in a softener, you're not going to be so straight and direct. Okay, so you know that's a really interesting question. If you don't mind me asking, who were the agents that you've spoken to that said that they would be willing to cut their commission in order to work with you? It's a valid question, guys, right? We don't know who these people are. We don't know what they do. We don't know what kind of business they do. You really don't want to start competing on price with somebody who you don't know. Do you think that Chanel or Louis Vuitton, when someone comes in and says, you know, so-and-so said that they would cut their price for this, well, where are you shopping at? Well, we went to Walmart, right? You're not going to compete on that. And you're going to lose sometimes. Accept the fact. Know your worth. You're going to lose sometimes on cost. But you need to make sure that you protect your value as much as you can. So be prepared. And that's what we're doing here. So when it comes into this, there's two questions that you're going to want to ask on this. Number one is, who are the agents that you've actually met with? You're kind of putting the prospect, the seller on the spot there, because we don't know if they really actually met with anyone as much as maybe heard what somebody might be willing to do, right? So putting them on the spot, you might put them in a uncomfortable position, or you could say, if you don't mind me asking, how many agents have you worked with or have you spoken to? Okay, that's a little bit less threatening. I would probably go with who is it that you're actually speaking to. I'm a professional. I ask questions. It's a legitimate question. If they don't come up with their name, they'll probably say, you know, I don't remember their names. If they say I don't remember their names, they're lying. They didn't meet with anyone. If they come up with some names, then of course there is a level of truthness to that, because when you answer to it, most people are not going to, the consumer, the seller, probably isn't going to be prepared for you to ask who it is that you met with, right? But, and if they, so here's the thing, is that if they respond quickly and they give you some names, it's probably true. If they say, I don't remember their names, they're probably lying. But in any case, the next thing that you want to do is go down to there is like, you know, regardless if you know who this person is or not, you don't know who they are, right? This is where we're going to put doubt into the seller's mind, right? So let's say they respond and say, you know, I've spoken with John Doe and Mary Agent, and they both said that in order to work with me, they would cut their commission. And then this is where you're going to start creating doubt. You know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I've worked in this market literally for over 20 years, and I've sold more than my fair share of homes. And, you know, to be honest with you, I don't ever recall coming across John Doe or Mary Agents. Do you happen to know if they specialize in this area? Probably not, right? People who actually compete on price typically don't by default compete on value. And the value that you provide as an agent is, the majority of that is your market knowledge and your experience, right? So they don't have that, so they're going to reduce it. So that's a legitimate question. I've never come across them. Do you know if they specialize in this business? Do you know how long they've been in the business? Do you know if they're newer to the business? Okay, do you know if they're actually a full-time agent, or are they like most of the agents and they just do this as a part-time gig, right? You're asking them questions that they probably don't know, and if they do know, they're going to answer them. But what you're doing is you're creating doubt. You're putting yourself in a position that you've worked this area for a long time. You've sold more than your fair share of houses in the market, and that's really setting them up for the next conversation. The next thing is, let's just assume that they say, well, you know, I don't know. Okay, you don't know how long they've been in the market. No, you don't know if they work in this market exclusively. No. Okay, you don't know if they're new to the business. No. Okay, so, well, John or Mr. and Mrs. Seller, the fees I charge for my service are based off of my level of service that I provide to my clients, my knowledge of your hyper-local market. You know, I've lived in this area for 20 years and I've done my business in this area for more than 20 years, and the experience that I bring to the table that of selling over 1,000 homes in that 20 years in this specific area. And so I base my fee structure off of those merits and not off the merits of perhaps agents who operate a discount brokerage model. Okay, guys, I'm putting more doubt into it. I'm not putting anybody down. I'm deflecting. I'm not saying that Mary and John are discount agents. Well, I am, but I'm just not saying it directly. I'm saying it in the context of most agents. I'm deflecting, right? I don't want the seller to pick up on cues that I have to put somebody down to increase it, as much as I want to highlight my experience. Okay, now, they're sitting down with you, you're having a conversation with them. Odds are you should have already shared with them how awesome you are before you're actually sitting down, because the next question is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, all money aside, before I answer that question, all money aside, do you feel that I have the qualifications and experience to get your home sold for the most money possible in the quickest amount of time? Do you feel that, commissions aside? Okay, now this could take your conversation into a different direction. Now, if you've done a really good job on your pre-qualifying the prospect, if you have a pre-listing packet that you're sending to them that is designed to actually outline and answer all of the main objections, all of the common objections that come up, then you should get a yes because they agreed to meet with you. If you get a no, well, that's a whole different conversation. Now you have to probe, why is it that you feel that I'm not qualified to do this? Now, I'm just going to assume that because you got the appointment for this scenario, you pre-qualified them, they have motivation, you sent your pre-listing packet to them, they have all the information of what you do. So I'm just going to assume that that had occurred and you're sitting down and you're at this process. So all the money aside, do you feel that I have the qualification and experience to sell the home? Well, yes, Brett, I do feel that you have the qualification to actually sell my home and the experience. Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, would it be safe to say that as long as we're able to come to a fair agreement, notice how I'm starting to throw in the word fair, right? That is some NLP stuff to actually embed, because I want them to subconsciously question themselves if they're not being fair. So look, all money aside, do you feel that if we can come to an agreement on the commission rate, that it would be fair to say that I'm experienced and you would be willing to list your home with me tonight? Is that a fair statement? Okay, guys, let's pause right there. If you're going to go toe-to-toe on commissions and you've just validated with them that you have the experience and the qualifications that they're looking for to sell your home, you really need to start framing the conversation so you can avoid at all costs the I need to think about it, right? So the next question would be, okay, so, or an amended question or an alternative question is, okay, so as long as you've said that I have the experience and the qualifications to sell your home, right? Yes, perfect. So would it be fair to say that there's nothing else that you need to think about as long as we can come up with a commission structure that you feel is fair, or we both feel that is fair, that we could perhaps move forward with getting your home on the market tonight? Would that be a fair statement to say? Okay, now you're drawing out the objections. You don't want to have a commission conversation until you've satisfied everything else, right? Now, this is going to be a judgment call. You're going to have to base on where you're at, where your personality is, where their personality is. But by God, you've already spent so much time getting to this point. Do whatever you can, to walk away. If you pre-qualified the listing appointment properly, you send them their listing package and you're sitting down, the presumption should be that you're going to ask them to list their home with you, right? You should have actually shook out all those objections beforehand before you get to this. But anyways, kind of going into that, and then they're going to say, yes, I think that we can do this. Okay, well, this is where you're going to want to flip it on to them. How much of a commission cut did the other agent say that they would do in order to sell your home? Well, they said that they would cut their commission 4%. 4%. Wow. And if you don't mind me asking, what are they going to do for that 4%? Well, what do you mean? Well, what is it that they bring to the table? Right? I've shared with you everything that I'm going to do that shares with you why I charge what I charge. I've sold over 1,000 homes across 26 states. What are they bringing to the table? Are they a new agent? Right? Here's the thing, guys. Let's be honest. When you're new, a lot of times, regardless of your value, you need to compete on cost. Because if you're going to go toe-to-toe with a veteran agent, with a lot of some of you are veteran agents, so you have that background that you can really push. Some of you are newer agents that you don't. Sometimes you're going to have to cut the cost, right? Because if you have a veteran agent that's charging 6% and you're a new agent trying to charge 6%, you're probably going to lose, right? So one way that you can compete is lowering the price, in which, in my case, if someone lacks in value, when someone lacks in service, when someone lacks in experience, the only way they're going to be able to compete is by lowering their cost, right? Let's be honest, they're not that good. Have you ever come across a discount broker that just amazed you? I haven't. So I'm sure there's someone out there. I just haven't come to them. And I hope that some of you guys aren't. And if you guys are, then hopefully I'm changing your perception. So going back to this, what is it that they're doing? How'd they come up that cost? And then you're going to turn it into, okay, so as we've talked, I've done this, that, and the other. What is it that you feel would be fair? So you just found out that they're paying 4%, and then now you need to find out what the seller has in mind. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I get that. Now I understand why it is that those guys are charging 4%. It doesn't sound like they have the qualifications, the experience, and the market knowledge that I have. So one question that I have to you, being that you do understand what it is that I do, and you've seen my signs, and you know that I've been in the market, and I hope you've checked my references. What is it that you feel would be fair for you guys to pay me in order to get your home sold? Now you're putting them on the offense, or actually on the defense, I should say, right? Now they need to come up with it and say that, well, you know, we think it would be fair for this. Do you think it would be fair for me to charge 4%, the same amount that a new agent's doing? Guys, if you look at any other profession, and the profession that I use a lot as an example is the legal profession, very similar to our structure of business, right? And if you are facing a very serious legal matter, let's say there's jail time, whether you're innocent or guilty is irrelevant to this, right? But if you are facing some serious thing, are you really going to go and try to find the most cheapest, the newest, the greenest, the guy that just got their bar, that just passed the bar, that's going to charge, you know, $25 an hour? Or are you going to be talking to the experienced attorney who has, you know, 20 years of experience, who's taken on thousands of cases like yours, that has won more than he's lost? And yes, cost is going to be an issue, but are you going to really be focused on cost? The problem with today's market, and with any other seller's market, is that from the perception of the consumer, because homes are selling so darn quickly, the perception of the consumer is that the value that the real estate agent brings versus the commissions they're paying is not, that the value is not as high, right? That's one of the reasons why it's going to be great to see a shifting market, because the perception of the consumer, the value increases. But your job as a professional real estate agent, as a professional salesperson, as just a professional, is to showcase your experience, showcase your market knowledge, and then sell that to them on why the value that you bring is higher, even though that you're charging a higher fee. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is to ask why questions, or just to ask questions in general. But ultimately, to come down to this objection handle, what time do I got? To come down to this one, it's not as easy as just they object and you do a rebuttal, right? Conversations don't go that way. Conversations are two-way streets, right? You need to get to the root of the question, and then you need to have them compare. You need to break it down to compare apples to apples, right? A new agent versus an experienced agent is not apples to apples, right? Not from the get-go. So you need to break it down. If your strength is your experience, if your strength is your market knowledge, if your strength is selling hundreds of homes, thousands of homes in this immediate area, you need to play to that strength. You need to be very vocal about that, and you need to highlight the contrasting with the other agent, right? And that's how you're going to do this. Now, Brett, what would happen if I go up against my biggest competitor in the market? They've sold as just many houses, they've sold just as many houses as I have. They've been in the business about as long as I have. They live right down the street from me. We work the same market. You know, it's your nemesis, right? What do you do then? Guys, now you're actually at the Super Bowl, right? Now you're actually at the main event. Now you're actually seriously competing on your presentation skills. Some people will simply choose somebody else equally qualified just because they don't like the other person, or they like the other person more, right? Or you need to really examine what it's worth to you to take that listing, because if what you get from the perception of the consumer, if what you get is there's no contrast to it and it's the same, right? You hire this agent, you get the same experience, the same market knowledge, you get the same years in the business, You get, you know, they're a major brand, and this one get the same thing. Now it's going on personalities, and now it's going on, you know, who they like more. But let's say that you guys are, you know, similar personalities and they like both of you, then, you know, then the only other caveat is you're going to have to compete on cost. The nice thing is, if you're going up against somebody with that kind of level of experience, that they're your biggest competitor in your market, you know, you guys aren't going to be talking about 4% listings. You're probably going to be talking in quarters of percentages, right? Perhaps, but that's a whole different question. So I have on my clock 8:55. So guys, for those of you that don't know, the Mike Ferry retreat is going to be kicking off today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. So I'm going to be participating in that. I don't want to be late. So it's 8:55, but I do want to give you guys some time to ask questions. So if you have questions, hold down the walkie-talkie space bar, and that's I have probably time for one question. Who wants it?
I just have what time is a good time to call you for a situation that I want to speak with you that takes longer?
Well, that's typically not what I do as far as consulting and training, but I would be happy to give you a call maybe a little bit later to see what you have to say, what's going on.
Thank you. Okay.
Anyone else? All right, guys. So I hope this helped. I went really, really deep into this. This was not a very easy objection to respond to. It never is an easy objection to respond to. This is something that these really hard questions, right? The closer that you get to an actual appointment or a signing, the harder the objections are going to become, right? We're not just, this is advanced objection handling. This is not novice objection handling. The objections that you get prospecting, you're going to get 90% of the objections are going to be the same. The further along that the consumer goes in your pipeline, the more personalized those objections become and the more difficult they become. Now, my strategy to answer these objections are all relatively the same. Ask questions, focus on what's fair, and focus on my experience, focus on my market knowledge. That's for me. You guys really need to really get hyper-local on, or not hyper-local, but very focused on your value proposition, the benefits that you bring to the table. How are you going to respond to an objection like that if you were going against a veteran agent or such, okay? It's not about just doing these trainings. It's about taking time out of your day and practicing these and taking these techniques and these strategies and implementing them into your talk track. That's the only way you're going to get better. And that's why we have the role-playing group, so you guys can actually practice that with another agent. So guys, I got to go. It's 8:58. I got to go on to the next thing. I don't want to be late. That rhymed. I'm a poet. And if you guys need anything, reach out. Cecilia, I'm going to call you right now real quick. All right. See you guys. Bye.